John, welcome back.
Hey, Kerry. Yeah, the San Francisco Chronicle just coined a good name for the pension crisis. They call it the silver tsunami. and this is really useful for those of us like you and I have been talking about pension problems forever, but it's an obscure issue. You know, big numbers and weird terms like unfunded liabilities that nobody really has a handle on. So it doesn't capture anyone's imagination, even though it's a really serious thing. You know, states and localities are running out of money to pay for their retirees. And that's causing all kinds of peripheral problems. You know, cops are being laid off, libraries are seeing their hours be shortened, and, you know, life is just getting harder and harder while taxes are going up. And it still doesn't completely feed the monster. You know, these pensions are just exploding because 10,000 baby boomers turn 65 every day. You know, and a lot of them have public sector pensions that they're going to start collecting on. So this is, a potential multiple bankruptcy issue for states and localities where some of them go, and then that sets off a deluge of others who nobody will lend money to anymore, and so they go bankrupt. So it could be that now that we have a name for it, that that's like global warming or nuclear winter, something that captures the imagination. It'll become more of a front page issue, which it deserves to be, because this is just gigantic. You know, you can look at the pension plans of most small towns. For instance, set up a Google email alert for unfunded liabilities and see what comes in. You know, you get dozens of stories about how the Smithville, Kentucky police force pension fund is only 42% funded. You know, and that it's like that everywhere out there, which means that once a few high-profile towns just flat out can't pay these bills anymore and declare bankruptcy or default in some other way, we'll start looking around for who's next, and the list will be immense. You know, it'll be 100 names on that list in just a cursory look, with Chicago at the very top.
No, there'll be thousands on that that list, John, because the reasons are quite simple, and that is there's so many overlapping, unnecessary entities, governmental entities, and they're all a mess. None of them have basically provided properly for their retirees. They've all underfunded the plans, and even the ones that were properly funding the plans, you had years where pretty much the market underperformed, like during the crash, and they fell behind, and they've never been able to catch up, even if they were caught up at that point, and most of them weren't. So what do you do here? What are we going to do, John? What's going to be the solution to this?
Well, there's no easy solution to this, because what will happen is states and localities will cut and cut and cut until the voters just won't accept it anymore. They won't be able to raise taxes anymore. They won't be able to stay in office if the politicians won't be able to stay in office if they intend to cut services any further. And you get this kind of political gridlock where nothing gets done, and then the only solution is just to declare bankruptcy. And when that happens, that's a really big deal when a town goes bankrupt. And it'll come as a shock to a lot of people who think they're, living in a middle class town where the finances are basically okay, and their birthright is police who show up on time, and taxes that are reasonably low, and streets that don't have gigantic potholes that just linger forever, et cetera, et cetera. And then you wake up one day and you have all of those things. The cops don't come when you call. The roads are a mess. Taxes are going up.
It's already like that in Baltimore. The cops don't come in Baltimore.
Yes, there are a lot of places where it's already like that, but a much bigger number where it's not like that yet, but it's heading that way.
Yes.
And so the ultimate end of this, when a lot of towns start filing for bankruptcy or otherwise defaulting, then the muni bond market blows up. And then the federal government will be forced to step in with a big bailout, a several $1 trillion bailout, coming at a time when maybe that's the straw that breaks the camel's back, because we already did a lot of massive bailouts during the Great Recession. And it's not clear that we have the wherewithal to keep doing this and still have a functioning currency. Because at some point, when you're taking on chunks of obligations, new obligations that are in the trillions of dollars, and you're doing it over and over again, people start to suspect that the currency that all of these obligations are denominated in isn't going to be as stable as it has been in the past. And so that's when you get the crack up boom and the currency crisis, et cetera, et cetera. So, it's not clear that one crisis or another will be the thing that sets it off. But there's a lot of catalysts out there. And the pension thing is much bigger than people seem to think it is. It doesn't get the credit. Eventually that'll change.
Yeah, eventually it will. I mean, look, the population as a whole are not going to be real sympathetic towards these overpaid, useless bureaucrats not getting their pensions. And the Stockton, California bankruptcy case, basically court ruled that the bankruptcy laws, federal bankruptcy laws, trump state constitutions. State constitutions, it's written there in virtually all of them that you cannot cut back public pensions for government workers. And that's been interpreted to mean for workers already covered. You can change the plan for future workers, but not for past. But the Stockton case has shown that you can change it under bankruptcy for current recipients, and that's going to freak them out. But that is what's going to happen. It's going to be what I call the golden age of municipal bankruptcy. Everyone will be rushing off. Hopefully, what some people will do is actually what counties and cities will do is say, look, we can file for bankruptcy, but we prefer to just work a settlement out with you. And they'll get haircuts anywhere. States can't go bankrupt. There is no provision in the bankruptcy law for states to go bankrupt. Congress will have to amend the Constitution for that. But any other subdivision of government can. Certain states like New Jersey require the municipality to obtain approval from the state before they can file. So some states won't give it, but eventually they'll all have to allow these entities, these governmental subdivisions, as they say in bureaucratic legalese speak, they'll have to allow them all to file. There won't be any other way to ensure that any of these recipients get anything from the plans. They will have to cash them out and switch to 401k type plans if they haven't yet already, defined contribution plans, which are not as generous, but can work. It's going to be interesting to see how the courts and governments deal with all this, because it's coming.
Gary, picture that world where things are so bad that the federal government has to find a way to allow states to declare bankruptcy. That is a psychologically very different space than where we are right now, And you're right, the numbers don't work. So something has to resolve this. And that's definitely one of the big possibilities, that states just declare bankruptcy and then rewrite their pensions, which means that a lot of people who think they are, at a certain level of financial affluence, in part because they have a really cushy pension, really aren't. You see all these stories on the outrageous pensions that some people get in places like California.
Oh yeah.
What was it? One guy gets $70,000 a month.
$76,000 a month, yeah.
Yeah, in a pension, yeah, and how that guy's an obvious target, right? So he thinks he's rich right now, and at some point in the future, they're going to come in and say, okay, you get $74,000 a year, not a month from now on. And all of a sudden, the guy was part of the 1%. Now he's part of the 50%.
now he's back where he belongs. He's like the dean of the medical school, though. So in all fairness, he's a guy who probably could have made millions of dollars in private practice, but chose education, or he could be a political hack. I have no idea how good this guy is. But he's not the only one. And one of the ways that they will modify these plans is anybody getting $50,000 or less, they'll get 75% of their pension. Anyone who's getting like above $100,000 is going to get whacked.
Yeah.
And That's what they're going to do with this, for sure. I mean, and then the abuses of these state and local pension plans are monumental. Disability, like cops in New York, you had the heart bill. So anyone who had a heart attack who was a cop was automatically attributed to their service as a cop because it's such a stressful job, which it certainly is. However, they could go out on like 3/4 disability, which is fine when you have a few guys doing it. But when you got 10,000, it puts enormous stresses on the system. And they just kept increasing and not coming up with any way on how they're going to pay for this.
Yeah. And eventually something has to happen. So eventually all of this stuff is going to get changed, but the process is going to be just brutal because it's, first of all, public sector unions are incredibly powerful politically. And second of all, most of them are who we consider really good people, the teachers and the cops and the guys who put out our fires. These are people who we don't want to suffer because they already have sacrificed a lot to help us. They're the people who make our cities work, and we don't want to take their money away or anything, but clearly the promises that were made can't be kept. And so the process of getting from here to there, to a sustainable pension system is going to be really painful in a lot of ways and really contentious. But pain and contention just is part of the package when you borrow way too much money, So we're there as a society, and we have no way to get through it except to just take the pain. We've got to do what has to be done, and we have to suffer what has to be suffered. But a lot of people, most people, have no inkling that this is coming, so it's going to be a shock to them, which means they're not prepared for it. So they're going to be shocked and then angry, and then that's going to play out in the political system. It's going to be really ugly.
But nothing surprises us anymore, John, right?
Well, one of the advantages of obsessing about the dark side of stuff is that you don't get as many unpleasant surprises, right? You see this stuff coming.
Yeah, you have a lot less friends, a lot less people want to talk to you because they just don't want to hear it. And but then all of a sudden it happens and they come flocking back to you like lemmings, right?
Well, that is how it works. People come back and say, "Oh, if I'd just listened to you, I would have sold my house in time, or I would have done this or that with my, So yeah, there's that satisfaction at the very end of the process when everything blows up. But as you go along, it can be kind of unpleasant being the voice of doom. Yeah. But that's our niche right now.
Hey, well, we're not doomers,
Carrie,
though.
When this tanks, when this system finally breaks down, then we can turn super positive and say, "Oh, look at all the tech stocks that are out there for pennies on the dollar, and all these new things coming along. These business models are going to revolutionize the world." We can be these happy guys pointing to a bright future when nobody believes it's possible. And I'm really looking forward to that day.
Me too, man. Me too. Hey, we were talking about the fake meat, the artificial meat, like the kosher pork last week. So somebody wrote a thing. They've already done it. It's called Soylent Green.
Well, see, that's one of the unintended consequences of cultured meat. Yeah. Is that you don't have to limit yourself to pork and beef once you can do it. Mm-hmm. You can do tiger or elephant or human just as easily as you can do pork or beef. Right. So it opens up some really bizarre culinary avenues.
I never thought of that, but God, it's so true. Hey, you want to have moose? You could have moose any day. You don't have to wait for the season in Alaska to start killing them off. It's great. And there's so many pluses to it.
Yeah. So you'll have all these really specialized niche meat factories.
Yeah.
If this plays out. And you'll have these restaurants where, you want an endangered species steak, you got it, and you don't have to kill anything for it, but you still get to eat, lemur or whatever if you want to. And I'm not sure what I think about that. I like the replacing pigs who are suffering in today's factory farms with something that's grown totally humanely, with just cells, et cetera. I love that, but the rest of this is going to be very problematic when it happens.
Hey, well, it just leaves. Do you remember on Star Trek? They would go to the meal dispenser and they type in, filet mignon, potatoes au gratin and sautéed spinach, push the button and boom, there it is. I mean, that's what this is like. It'll definitely solve the food problem, the hunger problem, although that's all political anyway, you know that. But yeah, thanks to who was it who said this? We have to attribute. We got to give these people names. It's so funny. I saw that. I said, John is going to really be hysterical over this. Well, whoever wrote that comment, thank you. And hey, we're thinking about the future here, right? We always got to be thinking about the future.
Yeah, and there's an awful lot going on besides this looming financial crisis.
Yeah.
Right? The world is an interesting place and a scary place apart from finance. And our focus is mostly finance because that's a really big story. And when it happens, it's going to be, something for the history books that we'll live through. But there are lots of other things out there that are just amazing that are going on right now, both terrifying, all the new weapons we're producing that had better never be used, and artificial intelligence becoming a potentially real thing and replacing most of factory agriculture with a lot more benign ways of producing food. All of that stuff is happening.
Yeah, it's definitely happening faster than you'll ever believe possible. It's happening for sure. And here's another one. Edward Hewitt wrote, the discussion about chemical bacon that could be kosher was very funny. Reminds me of a joke I heard 30 years ago. A rabbi and a Catholic priest had a conversation. The rabbi asked, my religion doesn't allow me to eat pork. I've always wondered how it tastes. Priest says, a bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich is great. Then the priest asks, I've never had sex with a woman. I always wondered what that's like. The rabbi says, I'm not sure, but I'm thinking of having sex. I'm thinking having sex with a beautiful woman is better than eating a bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich.
Yeah, you got the best part of that deal, I think.
Well, hey, just send the comments. We love getting them. And we'll be talking more about them on the show. But the Soylent Green one really cracked me up. And anyways, we like it. But, these are the creativity of man to solve these problems that seem to be insoluble. They're not unsolvable. All right. It's a simple matter is you need to think differently, as the saying goes, than the problem, the thinking that created the problem in the first place, right? I mean, that's really what it's about. So gold's getting slammed today, John, for a change. And silver, it looked like silver was going to lead in advance, but I think it's probably going to be closer to the end of the year, third quarter, when we see a real advance. I mean, but look, the relative strength, here it is. Ted Hike mentioned that synthetic meat, Soylent Green. But, the fact is the metals are showing like pretty amazing strength. They're trading basically in channels, sideways channels for years now. And normally you look at a channel and you say, if it breaks low below the channel, then you're going to have a major decline. If it goes above, then you'll have a major advance. In this case, I think it's going to be a major advance. I just don't see it going down again, not to any major lows. Maybe it'll hit the high 1200s again. What's your thought on this, John?
Well, I think the bigger trend is really positive for precious metals now, just because of all the debt that we're taking on at an accelerating rate out there, and the debate over the past couple of weeks was, is this the breakout? Is silver going to take off because of its great technicals in the futures market, and is gold going to take off because of all the debt we're taking on, or are they going to smack it back down again? Because the way this works is when the metals get a little bit of momentum, at 4 o'clock in the morning, somebody dumps $50 million worth of futures contracts when there's nobody else in the market, and the price gets smacked back down. And that's what we're seeing right now, that a ton of futures are being sold right now in both gold and silver, and that's knocking the price down. And that's something that's been going on for a long time. The big banks and the central banks of the world don't want gold or silver to take off, because that makes them look bad, because those are competing currencies. And so if gold goes up, that's the same thing as saying the dollar is going down. Central banks don't want that to happen. So there's a lot of intervention going on in the paper markets to try to manage the precious metals markets. Eventually, that's going to fail because the imbalances are just so huge. This is a little bit like what we were talking about in the pension market, where at a certain point the numbers become overwhelming, and the same thing is happening in the paper currency markets out there. There's just so much fiat currency being created and tossed out into the world relative to the amount of precious metals that are out there that when the dam does break, gold and silver will behave like Bitcoin did in 2017. They'll just take off, and we can't know when that's going to happen. But because it's out there, it's definitely worth owning precious metals so that you don't miss it when it happens, because you really don't want to miss this.